What's up, everybody? Paul here from #Sports. So, breaking news, word coming out. I want to thank Matt Perino, always a big friend of the show. Matt Perino posting. I'm just going to read his tweet exactly. It says some good news for the Bills. DT Ed Oliver today. All charges against him stemming from his May arrest for a DWI and unlawfully carrying a weapon have been dropped, and that is absolutely true. So what has happened? And excuse me, guys, I got enough complaints of you saying that the background of my this is actually my downstairs unused room looked like a prison in Tibet. So I've started the process of fixing the drywall. So there you go. But in any case, Ed Oliver, all charges are being dropped from a criminal standpoint. So what does that mean otherwise? So a couple things to point out here. First off, is that just because the criminal charges are being dropped doesn't and hasn't always meant anything from an NFL level. We talked about this a few weeks ago, where when you have criminal charges that have been applied, whether they exist or not, whether they're dropped or not, hasn't always impacted the way the NFL punishes you for said criminal charges. Now, one of the reasons that this is a really big deal is we talked about in that video again a few weeks ago that you look at the Buffalo Bills season and just assuming that he was going to be suspended for 3 to 4 games stemming off of the arrest, you look at the first 4 games of the season and you say, could you survive without Ed Oliver the first 3 to 4 games of the season? And admittedly, it's probably the easiest part of the schedule to get by. Right, are those first 4 weeks, even though there's a couple division games within there. It's Miami and it's the Jets. So, I mean, it's Miami and the Jets. So, but and Apex brings it up. And Mario is in the chat. Apex brings it up in the chat. He says, but with the new CBA, the commission no longer has that control. And that's exactly right. So under the new collective bargaining agreement, a lot of things changed. And one of them is the NFL's discipline policy. And here's where it's different. Before, Roger Goodell, whether there were criminal charges brought or not, would hand out suspensions as he saw fit. Right. It was a one-stop shop. And Goodell was also the person that oversaw any appeals. So it really was a one-stop shop. If he wanted you suspended for, degrading the shield, as a lot of people would refer to it, you were getting suspended. And that was pretty much it. So this new CBA process actually removes that. Right. So now there's actually an arbitrator, an appeals committee that will take on the case for any sort of suspensions that could happen. And they're going to make that determination. So it's not directly done by Goodell any longer. There's actually a third party that's going to be administering any initial suspensions as well as the appeal process. So it is very, very different than what it used to be. So what does that mean now? Well, this is the first year for this, right? So there's not a massive precedent set for this because there haven't been a ton of NFL arrests. Some years are hotter than others, I guess, but there haven't really been a ton of NFL player arrests in the offseason, and Oliver just being among just one of a couple. So with that being said, there's really no precedent set for how the league is going to handle this. Typically speaking, we just look at Chris Herndon as an example. He was suspended for, I believe, 3 games last season, right? But with this new arbitrator process, what is that going to mean for Ed Oliver? Well, here's where it gets a little sticky because there is no precedent set. This is, again, kind of where it gets a little sticky. If this arbitrator deems that Ed Oliver should not be suspended at all because all criminal charges are dropped, that sets a brand new precedent for the league. Obviously, it's great for Oliver. It's great for Bills fans. But what that does do is it states as the precedent, right, as one of the very first cases, that if you get criminal charges brought against you and they are dropped, you should not be punished by that, or not be punished for that within the scope of the NFL. Which I understand, and I do support that criminal charges should kind of be the linchpin to what happens if you're going to get suspended, right? Of course, there's a lot of there's a lot of levels to that, but on the surface, I have a tendency to think that's fair. Now, if that's actually the case of what happens, then expect massive lawsuits from every player who is ever suspended in the NFL having no criminal charges brought against them, right? Because that's going to open up the floodgates for what is going to be massive litigation. Cool Kitty says, how did the charges get dropped? They found that it was a lack of evidence, right? Because he had DWI charges, then unlawfully carrying a weapon. Again, there was a weapon inside the vehicle, but that was considered possession because it was inside the vehicle. All those charges, because of a lack of evidence, are being dropped. There were no drugs in his system, according to the blood tests as they had come back. So that's why at Oliver, those charges are being dropped as of right now. Um, so to cycle in, um, Ed Oliver might be available for the beginning of the season, which is kind of news. I think a lot of us just kind of anticipated eventually he was going to get suspended, because if he isn't suspended, it sets a nasty precedent and setting up the NFL for just complete and total legality issues, because any player who is suspended before with no criminal charges, they're going to say, well, judge, jury, and executioner was Roger Goodell. I was unfairly treated. I'm going to sue the NFL now because they've deemed that to be, not the standard that they want to follow. And who knows where those lawsuits are going to go? But the fact is that I'm sure the NFL is not going to be in the business of costing themselves millions of dollars in litigation. So I'm curious as to how this is going to play out. Is it very, very possible now that very possible now that Ed Oliver is not going to be suspended because criminal charges are dropped? Yeah, that is well within the realm of possibility. But the fact is, we really don't know if this arbitrator is going to uphold sort of the precedent set from previous suspensions, or whether they're going to set a new precedent. Real Talk comes in and says, that's dumb, Paul. Rule changes aren't retroactive. Civil cases can be brought to court for anything, but it doesn't mean they have a chance to win. You're absolutely right. And Heather Hathaway says the new CBA, new standard. You would think that because of a new collective bargaining agreement, that it would be the right time to set new rules. That's really the whole idea, right? You don't set these new processes in place expecting the exact same results. You're looking for a more fair process. The players were really adamant about getting this process in, and it would be an absolute shame to see them get zero results with their initial cases. Miguel asks, will the team still punish him? We talked about that on the video that we had done on this a while ago. And really, I think that just kind of depends on how Ed Oliver has reacted, right? So if Ed Oliver, he apologized to his team almost immediately. If he stepped up and taken accountability for the things that he did do, and spoke to his team about that, I believe that McDermott and Bean would likely honor the wherewithal at such a young age to kind of take that on. Now, if he didn't take that step forward, and didn't and was acting like what happened to him was unfair, instead of owning the mistakes that were made, because I'm sure that there was something there, then maybe McDermott and Bean would do something punitive. But I really don't foresee that with Ed Oliver. He seems like somebody that could be very well guided by Bean and McDermott. I believe that he would give and say all the right things to likely avoid any sort of team suspension. So I can't really imagine them. I can't really imagine them doing anything punitive to him at this point. But that's the deal. I just wanted to pop on, let you guys know charges are dropped. If you own an Ed Oliver jersey, you could probably dust that off for your driveway tailgate, because I would imagine now that block parties are going to be a thing if there's going to be no fans in the NFL allowed at stadiums. I'm assuming block parties are going to be a big thing. So if you got a fire pit in your driveway, a projector, and a Bluetooth speaker, you could be having yourself a pretty big driveway party looking at Bills football games, especially if the preseason is canceled. That's a whole nother thing that we didn't talk about at all, but we're not going to handle that here. Yeah, Richard Forbes says, I do believe that drunk driving is fairly serious. He's lucky that he didn't kill someone. Right, but those charges are being dropped. So again, lack of evidence. So as I said, I understand that there's wrongdoing here. The level and extent, we will never exactly know all the details. So just on face value, if charges are being dropped, you have to assume that something had presented itself to indicate that things weren't exactly as they were charged or reported at the very start of it. Again, we're never going to know all the details on this. So think of that what you will. But the truth is, we were never going to have all the details on that. That's going to be pretty well guarded. I am very, very curious how this is all going to go through the CBA and this new arbitrator process, and you should be as well, because getting Ed Oliver back for week 1, oh boy, that would taste sweet. All right, guys, have a good one. Paul from #. Enjoy your day.